deception. Rob Sinclair stood in his mahogany-paneled office, 37 floors above downtown Chicago, watching the evening traffic crawl through the streets like ants. At 45, he had built Sinclair Holdings from nothing, an empire spanning real estate, technology investments, and manufacturing. His reflection in the window showed a man who had aged well, silver threading through his dark hair, but his gray eyes held a coldness that hadn't been there in his younger years. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sinclair, your wife called. She's running late for dinner again." Rob's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Linda. Lock up when you leave." Patricia had been running late for the past 8 months. What she didn't know was that Rob had been documenting every lie, every fabricated story, every moment she spent with Vincent Torres, his own business partner and supposedly closest friend. The irony wasn't lost on him. 20 years ago, Rob had pulled Vincent out of bankruptcy, given him a partnership in Sinclair Holdings, and treated him like the brother he'd never had. Vincent had repaid that kindness by seducing Patricia and plotting to steal everything Rob had built. Rob's phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator, Marcus Fleming. "Package delivered to your home office. Everything you requested." Walking to his safe, Rob retrieved a thick manila envelope. Inside were photographs, financial records, hotel receipts, and recorded conversations. The evidence painted a clear picture. Patricia and Vincent weren't just having an affair. They were systematically positioning themselves to take control of his company and assets. The plan was elegant in its betrayal. Patricia would file for divorce, claiming emotional abandonment and demanding half of everything. Vincent, as his business partner, would buy out Rob's shares at a deliberately undervalued price during the difficult transition. Rob's own brother Derek, the family lawyer, was facilitating the legal framework. Even Rob's children, Tyler and Ashley, now 22 and 20, were involved, fed lies about their father's supposed neglect and promised generous trust funds once the takeover was complete. Rob poured himself a glass of 30-year-old scotch, the same brand he'd shared with Vincent when they'd first shaken hands as partners. The liquid burned, but not as much as the betrayal. His father, Harold Sinclair, had taught him a valuable lesson before his death 3 years ago. "Son, in this world, you can forgive stupidity, but never forgive betrayal. When someone shows you their true nature, believe them the first time." Rob had been believing for 8 months now. Tonight, he would begin showing them his. The family house was dark when Rob arrived, except for the light in Patricia's bedroom. He could hear her on the phone, her voice carried by the old Victorian's thin walls. "Yes, darling, he suspects nothing. Derek says the papers will be ready next week. Once Harold's inheritance is fully transferred into the joint accounts, we can move. Tyler and Ashley are completely on board. They're tired of living under their father's shadow anyway." Rob climbed the stairs quietly, each step deliberate. Patricia's voice continued, honey-sweet with malice. "Vincent, you don't understand how long I've waited for this. 23 years of pretending to love that cold, calculating man. 23 years of playing the dutiful wife while he built his empire. Well, now it's our empire." Standing outside their bedroom door, Rob listened to his wife plan his destruction with the man he'd once considered family. The conversation ended with promises of love and freedom, words that might have once cut deep. Now they only fueled the ice-cold determination growing in his chest. Rob retreated to his study, opened his laptop, and began typing. The emails went out to carefully selected contacts, investors, board members, clients, and most importantly, certain regulatory officials who owed him favors. The wheels were already in motion, but tonight he would add the final components to a machine designed for absolute destruction. At 2 a.m., Patricia finally returned to their bedroom, slipping under the covers beside him. She smelled like Vincent's cologne, the same expensive brand Rob had given him last Christmas. "How was your evening?" Rob asked quietly. "Oh, just dinner with my sister. You know how Karen gets when she's had wine." The lie came so easily, Rob almost admired her skill. He responded, turning away from her. "Patricia?" "Yes, darling. Do you remember our wedding vows? The part about faithfulness?" He felt her tense beside him. "Of course. Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering if they still mean anything to you." There was a pause, then her hand found his shoulder. "Robert, you're scaring me. What's brought this on?" Rob turned to face her in the darkness. Even now, she was beautiful, auburn hair, green eyes that had once made him forget everything else. But beauty couldn't hide the rot underneath. Nothing's brought it on. I was just thinking about commitments and how some people honor them while others. He let the sentence hang. Others what? Others reveal who they really are when they think no one's watching. Patricia's breathing changed, becoming shallow and quick. I don't understand what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Rob said softly. I'm simply observing that people show their true nature eventually. The question is whether we're brave enough to see it when they do. He rolled over, effectively ending the conversation, but he could feel Patricia staring at him in the darkness for a long time afterward. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The next morning, Rob sat in his father's study, surrounded by boxes of documents and personal effects they'd never properly sorted through. Harold Sinclair had been a man of meticulous records, and Rob was discovering just how meticulous. Hidden in a false bottom of his father's desk, Rob found a leather-bound journal dated just months before Harold's death. The entries made Rob's blood run cold. Patricia came to see me today, asked about changing the inheritance structure. Wants immediate access to the trust funds for Tyler and Ashley's educational needs. Something in her eyes reminded me of Margaret, that same calculating look before she tried to take half of everything in the divorce. Derek visited this evening. Suggested I consider making Patricia the executor of the estate instead of Robert. Claims Robert is too busy with business to handle family affairs properly. My own son, trying to manipulate me in my final months. Vincent called. Offered to help manage my investments during my illness. These vultures think I'm already dead. The final entry was dated just a week before Harold's sudden heart attack. I see them now for what they are. Patricia, Derek, even Vincent, they're circling like wolves. But they've underestimated Robert. He has my steel, my patience, and my memory for betrayal. I'm changing the will tomorrow. If they want to play games, they'll learn that the Sinclair family doesn't lose at games we've invented. Rob's hands trembled as he read his father's final legal document, hidden behind the original will that Derek had read to the family. Harold had indeed changed everything, but more importantly, he'd left Rob something far more valuable than money, evidence of the conspiracy that had killed him. The medical examiner's report, which Derek had somehow managed to keep sealed, showed traces of digitalis in Harold's system, a heart medication that could be fatal in large doses. Harold hadn't been prescribed digitalis. But Patricia, Rob remembered, had been treating her mother's heart condition for years and had easy access to the drug. Rob's phone buzzed. Vincent's name appeared on the screen. Rob, we need to talk. There are some irregularities in the quarterly reports that need your immediate attention. What kind of irregularities? The kind that could bring unwanted scrutiny from the SEC. Can you meet me at the office in an hour? Rob almost smiled. Vincent was accelerating the timeline, probably because Patricia had told him about last night's conversation. They were making their move earlier than planned, which meant they were getting desperate or sloppy. In Rob's experience, desperate people made fatal mistakes. I'll be there. The Sinclair Holdings building was nearly empty on Saturday morning. Rob found Vincent in the conference room, surrounded by financial documents and looking uncharacteristically nervous. Vincent, Rob said, settling into his chair. You look troubled. We have a problem. Someone's been asking questions about our Cayman accounts. The kind of questions that suggest a formal investigation. Rob raised an eyebrow. What kind of questions? About fund transfers, about the timing of certain investments, about. Vincent swallowed hard. About whether all partners were aware of all financial decisions. This was interesting. Rob had suspected Vincent was skimming money, but he'd never imagined his partner would be bold enough to suggest Rob was involved in the theft. Vincent, are you suggesting that I've been conducting business without your knowledge? No, of course not. But if there's an investigation, we need to present a united front. We need to make sure our stories align. Our stories should align naturally if we've been honest with each other. Rob leaned back in his leather chair. Have we been honest with each other, Vincent? The question hung in the air like a blade. Vincent's face went pale, then flushed red. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Have you been honest with me about everything? Business, personal, all of it. Vincent stood abruptly, beginning to pace. Robert, if this is about the time I've been spending with Patricia, so there is something to discuss about the time you've been spending with my wife? The admission hung between them like poison gas. Vincent realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late. I meant, we've been planning a surprise for your birthday. She wanted to coordinate with me about getting you something from the company. Rob nodded slowly. A surprise. How thoughtful. What were you planning to get me? A watch. A commemorative watch for 20 years of partnership. 20 years, Rob repeated. Has it really been that long? Time flies when you're building something meaningful with people you trust. Vincent sat down heavily, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Robert, I feel like there's something you're not saying. There are many things I'm not saying, Vincent. The question is whether I should start saying them now, or whether I should wait for a more appropriate moment. Rob's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then smiled, the first genuine smile Vincent had seen from him in months. Good news, Vincent. It looks like the investigation you're worried about is moving faster than expected. We should have answers very soon. What do you mean? Rob stood, straightening his tie. I mean that truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep we try to bury it. And speaking of truth, you should probably call Patricia. Tell her that our conversation tonight needs to happen sooner rather than later. What conversation? The one where we all stop pretending we don't know what's really happening here. Rob walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Vincent, that watch you mentioned? Don't bother. I have a feeling I won't be needing to keep track of time much longer. At least, not the way I used to. As the door closed behind him, Rob could hear Vincent frantically dialing Patricia's number. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to visit his children and his brother, to see just how deep the betrayal went. Chapter 3, The Web Unravels. Tyler Sinclair lived in a luxury apartment downtown, paid for by his father's generosity and his own sense of entitlement. At 22, he had never worked a day in his life, coasting through college on family money and emerging with a business degree he had no intention of using productively. Rob knocked on his son's door at precisely 10 a.m., knowing Tyler would still be in bed. Dad. Tyler appeared in boxers and an old fraternity shirt, hair disheveled and eyes bloodshot. What are you doing here? Wanted to talk to my son. Is that so unusual? Tyler stepped aside reluctantly. The apartment was a disaster. Empty bottles, takeout containers, and clothes scattered everywhere. This was what Rob's money had bought. A man-child with no direction and no respect. Tyler, sit down. We need to have a conversation about your future. If this is about the credit card bills, it's not about the credit card bills. It's about loyalty. Tyler's expression shifted, becoming wary. What do you mean? I mean that family loyalty used to mean something. Your grandfather built this family's wealth through hard work and sacrifice. I've continued that tradition. But you, what have you contributed? Dad, I'm still figuring things out. No, you're not figuring things out. You're waiting. Waiting for me to die so you can inherit everything without ever having to earn it. Tyler's face flushed. That's not fair. Fair. Rob laughed, but there was no humor in it. Tyler, let me tell you what's not fair. What's not fair is discovering that your own son has been meeting with lawyers to discuss challenging your father's competency to manage his own estate. The color drained from Tyler's face. How did I find out? Son, I've been playing this game since before you were born. The question isn't how I found out. The question is why you would betray the man who gave you everything. Tyler slumped onto his couch, head in his hands. Mom said you were planning to cut us out of the will. She said you were going to leave everything to charity out of spite. And you believed her? She had documents, Dad. Legal papers that showed you were changing the inheritance structure. Rob pulled out his phone and played a recording. Tyler's own voice filled the room. Once the old man is declared incompetent, we can have him committed and take control of the assets. Ashley's on board, and Uncle Derek says it's perfectly legal. Tyler's eyes widened in horror. Where did you get that? From your conversation with Vincent Torres 3 days ago. The conversation where you outlined your plan to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my life's work. Dad, it's not what it sounds like. It's exactly what it sounds like. Rob's voice was cold as winter. You conspired with my wife, my business partner, and my brother to destroy me. Your own father. Tyler stood up, pacing frantically. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Mom said if I didn't go along with the plan, she'd cut me off completely. She said you were already planning to disinherit me anyway. So you chose to stab me in the back rather than ask me directly? I was scared. Of what? Of me? Your father who has never raised a hand to you, never denied you anything you needed? Tyler broke down completely, sobbing like the child he'd never stopped being. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Rob watched his son cry and felt nothing. The love he'd once felt for Tyler had died the moment he'd heard that recording. "Tyler, do you know what your grandfather used to tell me about forgiveness?" Tyler looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "He said that forgiveness is earned, not given. And it can only be earned by someone who understands the magnitude of what they've done wrong." "I understand, Dad. I know I messed up." "No, Tyler, you don't understand. You think this is about hurt feelings or family drama. This is about betrayal. This is about you looking at everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed for, and deciding you'd rather steal it than earn it." Rob stood to leave. "There will be consequences for your choices, Tyler. Severe consequences. I want you to remember that when everything falls apart, you chose this path." "Dad, please." But Rob was already walking out the door. One son down, one daughter to go. Ashley Sinclair was easier to find than her brother. She was at the country club, playing tennis with her friends, and spending Rob's money like water. At 20, she was beautiful, charming, and completely devoid of moral character. "Daddy," she called out when she saw him approaching the court. "What a surprise. Are you here to watch me play?" "Actually, Ashley, I'm here to talk to you about your future." Her smile faltered slightly. "My future? Walk with me." They strolled through the manicured gardens behind the clubhouse, father and daughter in what looked like a pleasant conversation. Rob waited until they were completely alone. "Ashley, how much money do you think you'll inherit when I die?" She laughed nervously. "Daddy, that's a morbid question. You're going to live forever. Humor me. How much?" I don't know. Mom says the trust funds are worth about $10 million each for Tyler and me, plus our share of the company stock." "And how much is that worth to you? I mean, what would you be willing to do to secure that inheritance?" Ashley stopped walking. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind of question a father asks when he discovers his daughter has been plotting against him." Her face went white. "I don't know what you mean." Rob pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. Ashley meeting with Derek at a coffee shop, documents spread between them on the table. "This was taken last Tuesday. According to my investigator, you were discussing the timeline for having me declared mentally incompetent. You were asking Derek how long the process would take and whether there was any way to speed it up." Ashley's composure cracked. "Daddy, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly. I understand that my own daughter looked at me and saw nothing but an obstacle between her and my money. It's not like that." "Then explain it to me, Ashley. Explain how conspiring to have your father committed is an act of love." She began to cry, but Rob felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a child caught stealing cookies. "Mom said you were changing, becoming paranoid and controlling. She said you were planning to cut us out of the will completely. So you decided to cut me out of my own life instead? We were trying to protect you." Rob laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Protect me? By having me locked away in a mental institution so you could steal everything I've worked for?" "Daddy, please." "Ashley, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were little? About actions and consequences?" She nodded through her tears. "I told you that every choice has a price, and eventually, that price must be paid. You've made your choice. Now you'll pay the price." "What does that mean?" Rob was already walking away. "It means you should enjoy this country club while you still can. Your membership expires very soon." As he drove away from the club, Rob's phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen. "Robert, we need to talk. Something's happened." "What kind of something?" "The kind that requires immediate family discussion. Can you meet me at the house?" "Patricia and the kids are already on their way." Rob smiled grimly. "Of course they are. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Robert," Derek's voice was strained. "Whatever you think you know, we can work this out." "Derek, I'm sure we can. After all, we're family." The line went dead, and Rob pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. It was time for the final confrontation, the moment when all masks would finally come off. He thought about his father's funeral 3 years ago, how Patricia had held his hand and whispered comforting words while secretly planning his destruction. Tonight, at his father's house, surrounded by his father's memory, Rob would show them all what a Sinclair looked like when pushed too far. The reckoning had begun. Chapter 4. The Funeral Revelation. 3 years earlier, Harold Sinclair's funeral had been a masterpiece of false grief and hidden agendas. Rob stood at the graveside now, alone, remembering every detail of that day with crystal clarity. The funeral had been held on a gray October morning, with half of Chicago's business elite in attendance. Harold had been respected, feared, and secretly hated by many, the perfect tribute to a man who had built an empire through ruthless intelligence and unwavering determination. Rob had delivered the eulogy, speaking about his father's dedication to family and business. He had watched Patricia dab her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the grieving daughter-in-law to perfection. Derek had stood beside the casket with appropriate solemnity, while Tyler and Ashley had managed to look appropriately somber despite checking their phones periodically. But it was after the service, at the reading of the will, that the first cracks had appeared. Derek had read the document with professional detachment. To my son Robert, I leave the controlling interest in Sinclair Holdings and the family estate. To my daughter-in-law Patricia, I leave the sum of $1 million and my appreciation for 20 years of marriage to my son. To my grandchildren Tyler and Ashley, I leave trust funds of $2 million each to be accessed at age 25. Patricia's face had gone white. That's it. $2 million each for the children and $1 million for me. Derek had cleared his throat uncomfortably. There are also provisions for education, medical expenses, and living allowances until the trust funds mature. But what about the real estate holdings? The investment portfolio? That's worth nearly $100 million. That all goes to Robert, as the controlling heir. Rob remembered Patricia's expression in that moment. Not grief, but rage. Pure, undiluted rage that she had been cut out of the real wealth. Vincent had been there too, offering his condolences and his support during Rob's difficult transition. Even then, Rob had noticed how Vincent's eyes had lingered on Patricia, how they had exchanged meaningful glances when they thought no one was watching. But Harold Sinclair had been watching, even from beyond the grave. Now, standing alone at his father's graveside, Rob pulled out the real will, the one his father had hidden, the one that changed everything. In Harold's own handwriting, dated just days before his death, I have discovered the plot against my family. Patricia, Derek, Vincent, and even my own grandchildren believe they can steal what 3 generations of Sinclairs have built. They are wrong. Robert has my strength, my intelligence, and my memory. He will need all 3. I am changing my will, but I am not telling Derek. Let him read the false document. Let them show their true nature when they believe they have lost. Then Robert will know exactly who his enemies are. To my son Robert, I leave you not just my wealth, but my knowledge. In the safe behind my portrait, you will find evidence of every betrayal, every conspiracy, every attempt to undermine our family. Use it wisely. Show them no mercy they would not show you. The Sinclair family has survived worse than this. We will survive this too. Rob folded the letter and placed it back in his jacket. His father had died knowing the full extent of the conspiracy against him, had died planning Rob's ultimate victory. The digitalis in his system hadn't been enough to kill him quickly. Harold had lived long enough to ensure his son would inherit not just money, but justice. Walking back to his car, Rob checked his phone. 17 missed calls from various members of his family. It was time to go home and end this charade once and for all. The family house was blazing with lights when Rob arrived. Every car was in the driveway. Patricia's BMW, Derek's Mercedes, Tyler's Audi, Ashley's Lexus, and Vincent's Porsche. The gang was all here. Rob sat in his car for a moment, looking at the house where he had grown up, where he had brought Patricia as a new bride, where his children had taken their first steps. Tonight, this house would witness the end of everything. He walked through the front door to find them all waiting in the living room. His wife, his brother, his children, and his business partner. 5 people who had shared his life, his love, and his trust. 5 people who had conspired to destroy him. Robert, Patricia stood up, her face a mask of concern. We've been worried about you. Derek says there are some legal issues we need to discuss immediately. Derek stepped forward, holding a manila folder. Robert, I've been contacted by federal investigators. There are serious questions about Sinclair Holdings' financial practices. We need to present a unified response. Rob looked around the room, studying each face in turn. Before we discuss legal issues, I have something to share with all of you. He pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on the coffee table. This contains recordings of conversations between all of you over the past 8 months. Conversations about having me declared mentally incompetent, about stealing my company, about dividing my assets among yourselves. The silence was deafening. Patricia's face went completely white. Vincent actually took a step backward. Robert, Derek said carefully, I think you're having some kind of episode. Maybe we should call your doctor. Rob laughed. Still playing the game, Derek? Even now. He pressed play on the recorder. Tyler's voice filled the room. Once the old man is declared incompetent, we can have him committed and take control of the assets. Then Ashley, how long will the commitment process take? I have expenses to consider. Patricia's voice, honey-sweet with malice. 23 years of pretending to love that cold, calculating man. Well, now it's our empire. Vincent, the SEC investigation is perfect timing. We can claim Robert's been making unauthorized trades while mentally unstable. And finally, Derek, I can have the commitment papers ready by Friday. Once Robert's declared incompetent, Patricia becomes guardian of his assets and Vincent takes over the company. Rob turned off the recorder. Would anyone like to explain these conversations? The room erupted in chaos. Patricia began crying, claiming the recordings were taken out of context. Tyler and Ashley both started talking at once, trying to shift blame to each other. Vincent demanded to know how Rob had obtained private recordings. Only Derek remained calm. Robert, even if these recordings are authentic, they don't prove any illegal activity. Planning for contingencies isn't a crime. You're right, Derek. Planning isn't a crime. But what you've actually done, that's something else entirely. Rob walked to his father's portrait above the fireplace and pressed a hidden switch. The painting swung aside, revealing a safe. From it, he withdrew a thick folder. My father was more observant than any of you realized. Derek, he knew you were embezzling from his estate. Patricia, he knew about the digitalis you were slipping into his medication. Vincent, he knew about the Cayman accounts you've been using to funnel money out of our company. He opened the folder and began laying out documents, bank records, medical reports, photographs, recorded conversations. Tyler, Ashley, he knew you were planning to contest his will even before he died. He knew everything. Patricia stood up shakily. Robert, you're having a breakdown. These are paranoid delusions. Am I? Rob pulled out a hospital report. This is the toxicology report from Dad's death. The one Derek somehow kept sealed. It shows lethal levels of digitalis in his system. Digitalis from the prescription you were managing for your mother, Patricia. Derek stepped forward. You can't prove Patricia administered anything to Harold. Actually, I can. Rob produced a small video camera. Dad had security cameras installed throughout this house in his final months. Cameras you didn't know about. Would you like to see the footage of Patricia dissolving pills in his evening brandy? The silence that followed was profound. Patricia slowly sank back into her chair, all pretense finally abandoned. What do you want? Vincent asked quietly. Rob smiled, and it was the most terrifying smile any of them had ever seen. What do I want? I want justice. I want consequences. I want all of you to understand that when you betray a Sinclair, there is always a price to pay. He pulled out a stack of legal documents. These are lawsuits, criminal charges, and asset seizures. Vincent, you're being charged with embezzlement and fraud. Your partnership in Sinclair Holdings is terminated, and you'll be lucky if you avoid federal prison. Vincent's legs gave out, and he collapsed into a chair. Derek, you're being disbarred and charged as an accessory to murder. The Illinois State Bar is very interested in attorneys who help poison their clients. Derek's composure finally cracked. Robert, please. Patricia, you're being charged with first-degree murder. The district attorney is very excited about prosecuting someone who slowly poisoned her father-in-law for inheritance money. Patricia began sobbing hysterically. Tyler, Ashley, you're both being cut off completely. No trust funds, no allowances, no family money. You're adults now. Time to learn what the real world looks like. Dad, please. Ashley fell to her knees. We were manipulated. Mom told us you were going to cut us off. And instead of talking to your father, you decided to have me committed. You chose to believe lies because they were easier than truth. Rob walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. This house, all the properties, all the investments, they're being transferred to a charitable foundation in my father's name. None of you will see a penny of Sinclair money ever again. Robert, Patricia screamed. You can't do this. I'm your wife. Rob turned back to her, his eyes cold as winter. No, Patricia, you are my wife. Now you're just another criminal who thought she could outsmart us, Sinclair. He walked to his car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of his family and the beginning of his perfect revenge. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. Chapter 5. The Perfect Storm. The next morning, Rob sat in his downtown office as the city woke up below him. His phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. Reporters, lawyers, family friends, business associates. Word was spreading faster than wildfire through Chicago's interconnected web of wealth and power. Linda, his secretary, knocked on the door. "Mr. Sinclair? There are federal agents here to see you." 2 FBI agents entered, showing their credentials. Agent Sarah Martinez was young, ambitious, and thorough. Agent Tom Bradley was older, experienced, and had the look of a man who had seen every kind of human betrayal imaginable. "Mr. Sinclair," Agent Martinez began, "we understand you've provided evidence regarding several serious crimes." Rob gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Please sit down. I have quite a story to tell you." For the next 3 hours, Rob laid out the entire conspiracy. He provided the recordings, the financial documents, the medical evidence, and most damning of all, the security footage from his father's house showing Patricia methodically poisoning Harold Sinclair over a period of weeks. Agent Bradley whistled low. "This is the most comprehensive case package I've seen in 20 years. You've essentially done our job for us." "I had an excellent teacher," Rob replied. "My father always said that if you're going to play a game, you should play to win." Agent Martinez looked up from her notes. "Mr. Sinclair, why didn't you come forward sooner? If you knew about your father's murder 8 months ago." "Because I needed them to commit themselves completely. I needed them to show me exactly how far they were willing to go, exactly who they really were underneath all the family pretenses." "That's a dangerous game." Rob's smile was cold. "Agent Martinez, dangerous games are the only ones worth playing." After the agents left, Rob turned his attention to the financial destruction he had been planning for months. Vincent Torres was about to discover that stealing from a Sinclair came with consequences that went far beyond simple embezzlement charges. Rob picked up his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never used. "Dimitri, it's Robert Sinclair. I believe you mentioned once that you were looking for opportunities to expand your construction business." Dmitry Volkov was a Russian immigrant who had built a legitimate construction empire in Chicago, but he had never forgotten his roots in a much harsher world. He owed Rob several favors from the early days when Rob had helped him secure permits and contracts that other businessmen wouldn't touch. "Robert, my friend, it has been too long. How can I help you?" "I need some properties to have sudden, serious structural problems. Properties that would require immediate evacuation and extensive, expensive repairs." There was a pause. "What kind of properties?" "Vincent Torres owns several apartment buildings on the south side. I understand they were built with questionable materials and craftsmanship." Dmitri chuckled, a sound like grinding gravel. "Ah yes, Vincent Torres. I remember him. He tried to undercut my bids by using inferior concrete and unlicensed workers. Very dangerous practices. It would be a shame if the city building inspectors were to discover just how dangerous." "Indeed. A shame for the residents who could be hurt. I will make some calls today. I believe several anonymous tips about structural integrity will reach the proper authorities." "Thank you, Dmitri." "And Dmitri? The structural problems should be genuine. I don't want anyone actually hurt." "Of course not. But when buildings are constructed with substandard materials by men who cut corners, sometimes problems develop naturally." By noon, Vincent's phone was ringing with calls from panicked tenants and city inspectors. By evening, 3 of his apartment buildings had been condemned as structurally unsound, forcing the immediate evacuation of over 200 residents. The lawsuits began filing within hours. But Rob wasn't finished with Vincent. Through a network of business contacts and carefully placed investments, Rob had been quietly acquiring the debt on Vincent's other properties. Vincent owed money to banks, private lenders, and investment firms, debts that Rob now owned through shell companies and holding corporations. At 6 p.m., Vincent's lawyer called him with devastating news. All of his loans were being called in immediately due to moral turpitude clauses that were triggered by his federal indictment. Vincent had 48 hours to pay back $17 million or lose everything. Meanwhile, Patricia was discovering that being charged with murder came with its own unique set of problems. Her bank accounts had been frozen pending investigation. Her credit cards were canceled. Her country club membership was revoked. Her friends were avoiding her calls. Worse yet, Rob had hired the most ruthless divorce attorney in Chicago, a woman named Catherine Wolfe who specialized in destroying cheating spouses. Catherine had a reputation for turning divorce proceedings into bloodbaths, and she was particularly motivated when her clients had been betrayed by family members. Patricia's own lawyer, a country club friend who specialized in gentle, amicable divorces, was completely outmatched. By the end of the first day, Patricia had lost access to the family homes, the cars, and even her jewelry, all tied up in evidence or asset seizures. Derek's situation was perhaps the most poetic. The Illinois State Bar moved with unusual speed to suspend his license pending a full investigation into his ethics violations. But Rob had gone further than that. Using private investigators, Rob had uncovered years of Derek's legal malpractice. Clients overcharged, cases mishandled, trust funds misappropriated. Within 48 hours, Derek was facing not just disbarment, but criminal charges for fraud and theft. The man who had helped plan Rob's destruction was being systematically destroyed by the very legal system he had tried to manipulate. Tyler and Ashley were learning what life looked like without their father's money. Their credit cards were canceled. Their allowances stopped. Their insurance policies were terminated. The apartment leases that Rob had been paying were voided due to non-payment. Ashley called Rob in tears. "Daddy, please, I can't afford rent. I don't have anywhere to go." "Ashley, you're 20 years old. Most people your age work for a living. But I don't know how to get a job." "Then I suggest you learn quickly." Tyler's call came an hour later. "Dad, my car was repossessed. How am I supposed to get to job interviews without a car?" "The same way millions of other people do it, Tyler. Public transportation." "But Dad." "Tyler, you made your choice. You chose to betray your father for money. Now you get to discover what life looks like when you don't have that money." As the sun set on the second day of Rob's revenge, he sat in his office reviewing the reports from his various investigators and lawyers. Vincent was facing bankruptcy and federal prison. Patricia was facing life in prison for murder. Derek was facing disbarment and his own criminal charges. Tyler and Ashley were facing poverty and the real world for the first time in their lives. But Rob wasn't done. The real masterpiece of his revenge was still to come. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for Channel 7 News. "This is Robert Sinclair. I believe you're interested in the story about the Chicago socialite who murdered her father-in-law for inheritance money. I have security footage you're going to want to see." Tomorrow, the entire city would know exactly what Patricia Sinclair had done. And by the end of the week, Rob's revenge would be complete. Chapter 6: The Media Circus. Chicago woke up to the news story of the decade. Channel 7's morning show led with exclusive security footage of Patricia Sinclair methodically poisoning her father-in-law, accompanied by audio recordings of the family conspiracy that followed. Rob watched from his office as the story exploded across every media platform in the city. The Chicago Tribune's headline read, "Socialite's Deadly Inheritance Plot." The Sun-Times went with, "Murder in Mansion, How Chicago's Elite Family Destroyed Themselves." But it was the television coverage that truly captured the magnitude of the scandal. The security footage was devastating. Crystal clear video of Patricia crushing pills and stirring them into Harold Sinclair's evening brandy, night after night, week after week. Rob's phone rang. It was Catherine Wolfe, his divorce attorney. "Robert, have you seen the news this morning?" "I have. How is Patricia handling the media attention?" Catherine's laugh was predatory. "She's not. Her lawyer withdrew from the case an hour ago. Apparently, representing accused murderers is bad for a country club attorney's reputation." "And the divorce proceedings?" "With the criminal evidence now public, we can expedite everything. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, but when one spouse is charged with murdering a family member, the courts tend to move quickly. We should have final papers within the week." Rob smiled. "Excellent. Make sure she gets nothing." "Oh, she'll get something. She'll get the bills for her own legal defense." By noon, the story had gone national. CNN picked it up, then Fox News, then the major networks. The Sinclair family scandal was becoming a symbol of everything wrong with American wealth and privilege. The lengths people would go to for money, the betrayal of family bonds, the corruption of love by greed. Rob's secretary announced his next visitor, Jonathan Hayes, the district attorney for Cook County. Hayes was young, ambitious, and politically savvy. He had built his career prosecuting white-collar crime and high-profile cases. The Sinclair murder was exactly the kind of case that could launch him into the governor's mansion. Mr. Sinclair, I want to thank you for bringing this evidence forward. This may be the most airtight murder case I've ever seen. I'm glad to help, Mr. Hayes. Justice for my father is all I've ever wanted. I do have some questions about the timing. You've had this evidence for months. Why did you wait? Rob leaned back in his chair. Mr. Hayes, if I had come forward immediately, Patricia could have claimed the poisoning was accidental, that she was confused about medications, that she was trying to help, that it was all a tragic mistake. But I needed her to show her true intent. I needed her to reveal that this was all about money. The conspiracy to have you declared incompetent. Exactly. That proves premeditation, proves that my father's murder was part of a larger plan to steal the family wealth. Without that context, you might have been looking at manslaughter charges instead of first-degree murder. Hayes nodded approvingly. You've essentially built the entire case for us. The evidence is overwhelming. My father taught me to be thorough. Speaking of your father, the media is portraying him very sympathetically. The murdered patriarch who saw through his family's betrayal. Rob's expression darkened. My father was a good man who deserved better than to die slowly at the hands of someone he trusted. But he was also smart enough to ensure his own justice. After Hayes left, Rob turned his attention to the final phase of his revenge. Vincent Torres was scheduled to lose everything today, but Rob wanted to make sure he understood exactly why. Rob drove to Vincent's office building, a gleaming tower that Vincent had bought with money stolen from Sinclair Holdings. The building was now surrounded by news vans and federal agents executing search warrants. Vincent's secretary was packing boxes when Rob walked into the office. Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Torres has been looking for you. He says it's urgent. Rob found Vincent in his corner office, surrounded by boxes and looking like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. Vincent's expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his hands were shaking. Robert, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Hello, Vincent. You look stressed. Vincent laughed bitterly. Stressed? Robert, I'm being destroyed. The feds have seized everything. My accounts, my properties, my investments. My lawyers say I'm looking at 20 years in federal prison. That does sound stressful. Robert, please. We've been friends for 20 years. Surely we can work something out. Rob sat down across from Vincent's desk, the same desk where they had shaken hands as partners 2 decades ago. Work something out? Vincent, you stole from me. You seduced my wife. You conspired to have me committed to a mental institution so you could steal my life's work. What exactly did you want to work out? Vincent's composure finally cracked completely. I'm sorry. God, Robert, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. When did you mean for it to go, Vincent? When you started sleeping with Patricia? When you started stealing from the company? When you started planning to have me declared insane? It started innocent. Patricia was lonely. You were always working. Don't. Rob's voice was deadly quiet. Don't you dare blame me for your betrayal. Vincent slumped in his chair. You're right. It's my fault. All of it. But Robert, we were brothers once. Doesn't that mean anything? Rob studied the man who had been his closest friend, his business partner, his brother in everything but blood. For a moment, Vincent might have seen a flicker of the old warmth in Rob's eyes. Then it vanished. Vincent, my father used to tell me that there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who honor their commitments and those who don't. You showed me which kind you are. Robert, please. You want to know what our friendship means to me now? It means I know exactly how to hurt you. It means I know your weaknesses, your fears, your vulnerabilities. And it means I have 20 years of trust and intimacy to use against you. Rob stood up. Enjoy federal prison, Vincent. I hear the accommodations are much less comfortable than the penthouse you bought with my money. As Rob walked toward the door, Vincent called out desperately. What about Patricia? Are you really going to let them send your wife to prison for life? Rob paused at the door without turning around. Vincent, Patricia stopped being my wife the moment she chose you over me. Now she's just another criminal who thought she could outsmart a Sinclair. The door closed behind him with a finality that Vincent felt in his bones. Outside the building, Rob was approached by a reporter from Channel 7. Mr. Sinclair, how does it feel to see your family destroyed like this? Rob looked directly into the camera. My family isn't destroyed. My family died 3 years ago when my father was murdered. What you're seeing now is simply justice being served. Do you have any regrets about how this has played out? Rob considered the question seriously. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that people I loved and trusted revealed themselves to be capable of such betrayal. But I don't regret ensuring that they face consequences for their actions. What's next for you, Mr. Sinclair? Rob smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached his eyes. I'm going to honor my father's memory by continuing to build the legacy he started. The Sinclair name will survive this scandal, and it will be stronger because of it. As he drove away from Vincent's building, Rob's phone buzzed with a text message from his private investigator. Phase 3 complete. Tyler and Ashley have both been evicted. Patricia has been denied bail. Derek's assets have been seized. Vincent's bankruptcy filing was rejected due to criminal fraud. They have nothing left. Rob pulled over and sat in his car for a moment, feeling the weight of what he had accomplished. In less than a week, he had completely destroyed 5 people who had betrayed him. They would all face years in prison, financial ruin, and social disgrace. But as he sat there, Rob realized something surprising. He felt no satisfaction, no joy, no sense of victory. He felt only emptiness where his family used to be. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Son, revenge is justice, but justice is cold comfort when you're eating it alone. Rob started his car and drove toward the cemetery where his father was buried. It was time to tell Harold Sinclair that his family had been avenged and that the Sinclair name would endure. But first, he had one final surprise for Patricia. One last twist that would ensure she understood exactly what she had lost when she chose betrayal over love. Chapter 7. The Final Reckoning. Patricia Sinclair sat in her jail cell, staring at the concrete walls that had become her world. The Cook County Jail was a far cry from the luxury she had known for 23 years. Her designer clothes had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Her manicured nails were now chipped and dirty. Her auburn hair hung limp and unwashed. She had been denied bail. The judge ruled that someone who had methodically poisoned a family member was too dangerous to release. Her court-appointed attorney was a tired public defender who specialized in plea bargains, not miracle defenses. The media attention had been relentless. Every day brought new revelations about the Sinclair family scandal. Patricia's photograph was on the front page of newspapers across the country, always with headlines that painted her as a cold-blooded killer who had destroyed her own family for money. A guard approached her cell. Sinclair, you have a visitor. Patricia's heart leaped. For a moment, she hoped it might be Robert, coming to forgive her, to work out some kind of arrangement. Despite everything, she still couldn't quite believe that the man she had lived with for over 2 decades would completely abandon her. But it wasn't Robert waiting in the visitor's room. It was Catherine Wolfe, Robert's divorce attorney. Catherine sat across from Patricia with a predator's smile. She was elegantly dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Everything about her screamed expensive, competent, and utterly ruthless. Mrs. Sinclair, or should I say Ms. Morgan? I understand you're planning to revert to your maiden name. Patricia's voice was hoarse from crying. What do you want? I'm here to discuss your divorce settlement. What settlement? Robert's trying to leave me with nothing. Catherine opened a leather briefcase and withdrew a thick document. Actually, that's not quite accurate. My client is prepared to be quite generous. Patricia's eyes widened with hope. Generous? Oh yes. You'll receive $50,000 in cash, plus this beautiful document. Catherine slid the papers across the table. Patricia scanned the document quickly, her hope turning to horror. This is a confession. You want me to admit to everything. The murder, the conspiracy, all of it. In exchange for the $50,000 and Robert's agreement not to pursue civil damages for your theft of family assets. $50,000? I was married to him for 23 years. Catherine's smile was arctic. Mrs. Sinclair, you poisoned his father and tried to steal his life's work. Under the circumstances, $50,000 is quite generous. Especially considering that your alternative is spending the rest of your life in prison with nothing. Patricia stared at the confession, her hands trembling. If I sign this, I'm admitting to first-degree murder. You're admitting to what you actually did. The security footage already proves your guilt. This confession simply ensures that you'll receive a life sentence instead of the death penalty. The words hit Patricia like a physical blow. Death penalty? Illinois may not have executed anyone recently, but first-degree murder with special circumstances, poisoning an elderly victim for financial gain, does qualify for capital punishment. The district attorney is quite ambitious, and this case could make his career. Patricia began to cry again, but they were different tears now, not tears of self-pity, but tears of genuine terror. What does Robert get out of this? Closure. The satisfaction of knowing that you've accepted responsibility for what you've done, and the knowledge that you'll never be able to appeal your conviction or claim innocence. Patricia looked at the document again. Signing it would mean admitting to everything, would guarantee she would die in prison. But refusing to sign it might mean dying much sooner. I need time to think. Catherine stood up. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer expires, and you can take your chances with a jury. After Catherine left, Patricia was escorted back to her cell. She lay on the narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, trying to process how her life had come to this point. 24 years ago, she had been Patricia Morgan, a beautiful young woman from a middle-class family who had caught the eye of Robert Sinclair at a charity fundraiser. Rob had been successful even then, but nothing like the business empire he would eventually build. She had married him not for love, but for security. Rob was smart, ambitious, and already wealthy enough to provide the lifestyle she wanted. She had played the role of the devoted wife while secretly resenting the predictable comfort of their life together. Vincent had offered her something different: passion, excitement, the thrill of forbidden love. What had started as an affair had gradually evolved into something much more dangerous, a plan to take everything Robert had built. It had seemed so simple. Robert worked constantly, barely noticed her anymore. His children respected him but didn't particularly like him. His brother was jealous of his success. Even his father had been tired, sick, ready to let go of life. The plan had been elegant: slowly poison Harold to speed his death, then use Robert's grief and isolation to have him declared mentally incompetent. Vincent would take over the business, Patricia would control the assets, and everyone would get what they wanted. Except Robert had been watching. Robert had been planning. Robert had been 3 steps ahead of them from the very beginning. Now Vincent was facing 20 years in federal prison. Derek had been disbarred and was looking at his own criminal charges. Tyler and Ashley were living in poverty, learning what the real world looked like without their father's money. And Patricia was facing life in prison, or possibly death, for murdering a man who had never been anything but kind to her. The next morning, Patricia asked to see Catherine Wolfe again. I'll sign the confession, she said quietly. Catherine laid out the documents with professional efficiency. Initial here, here, and here. Sign at the bottom of each page. Patricia's hand shook as she wrote her name, acknowledging her guilt in the murder of Harold Sinclair and the conspiracy to defraud Robert Sinclair. There's one more thing, Catherine said, producing a final document. A personal letter from Robert. Patricia opened the letter with trembling fingers. Patricia, by the time you read this, you will have confessed to murdering my father and attempting to destroy everything he built. I want you to understand that this isn't about revenge, it's about justice. You had choices every step of the way. You chose to betray our marriage vows. You chose to seduce Vincent. You chose to poison an innocent old man who had never done you any harm. You chose to try to steal my life's work. Each choice led to the next, until you became someone I no longer recognized. The woman I married would never have been capable of such cruelty. I loved you once, Patricia. I loved you enough to forgive your affairs, your spending, your selfishness. But I could never forgive murder. I could never forgive what you did to my father. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, and you will die there. Every day, I want you to remember that this is the life you chose when you decided that money was more important than family. The Sinclair name will survive the scandal. My father's legacy will endure. But you? You will be remembered only as the woman who betrayed the family that gave her everything. Robert. Patricia crumpled the letter, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since this nightmare began, she truly understood what she had lost. Not just money, not just freedom, but the love of a man who had once cherished her, who had once been willing to forgive her anything. Mrs. Sinclair? Catherine's voice seemed to come from very far away. Is there anything else? Patricia looked up, her face ravaged by grief and regret. Tell Robert that I'm sorry. Tell him I know it doesn't matter now, but I am truly sorry. Catherine's expression softened slightly, the first hint of humanity Patricia had seen from her. I'll tell him. As Patricia was led back to her cell, she realized that the $50,000 meant nothing to her now. She would never spend it, never enjoy it. It was just Robert's way of ensuring she understood exactly how little she was worth to him now. Back in his office, Robert received Catherine's call about Patricia's confession and her final message. She seemed genuinely remorseful, Catherine reported. I think she finally understands what she's lost. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, Catherine. Make sure the confession is filed with the court immediately. What about her apology? She seemed to want you to know. Patricia lost the right to apologize when she chose murder over marriage. Her regrets don't change what she did to my father. After hanging up, Robert sat alone in his office, looking out at the city his father had taught him to conquer. The Sinclair Empire was stronger than ever, purged of the betrayers who had tried to destroy it from within. But the victory felt hollow. Robert had achieved perfect justice, perfect revenge, and perfect isolation. He was the last Sinclair standing, and he would bear that burden alone. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. 6 months after the scandal broke, Chicago had moved on to newer controversies and fresher scandals. But the Sinclair case had left its mark on the city's collective memory, a cautionary tale about greed, betrayal, and the price of crossing the wrong family. Robert sat in his father's study, now his own, reading the morning reports. The business had not only survived the media attention, but had actually grown stronger. Investors admired the way Robert had handled the crisis, seeing it as evidence of his strategic thinking and uncompromising principles. Vincent Torres had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. He would be 68 when he was released, assuming he survived that long. Federal prison was not kind to white-collar criminals, especially those who had betrayed powerful families. Derek Sinclair had been disbarred and sentenced to 8 years for his role in the conspiracy. His law practice had been dissolved, his assets seized to pay restitution to his victims. The brother who had once been Robert's closest family advisor now worked in the prison library, filing legal briefs for inmates who couldn't afford real lawyers. Patricia's murder trial had been a media sensation that lasted 3 weeks. The security footage of her poisoning Harold Sinclair had been played repeatedly, each viewing making her guilt more undeniable. Her confession had eliminated any possibility of appeal, and she had been sentenced to life without parole. Robert had attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row where Patricia could see him. He had watched impassively as the prosecution detailed her crimes, as medical experts explained how digitalis slowly destroyed Harold's heart, as character witnesses testified about the man she had murdered. Patricia had looked at him often during the trial, searching his face for any sign of the man who had once loved her. She found nothing but cold judgment. Tyler and Ashley had both tried to rebuild their lives, but they were learning that 20 years of privilege was poor preparation for the real world. Tyler had found work as a waiter at a chain restaurant, earning minimum wage and living in a studio apartment that leaked when it rained. Ashley had moved back in with her mother's sister, working retail at a department store and taking night classes at a community college. Both had tried repeatedly to contact their father, but Robert's secretary had standing instructions to refuse all calls from his former children. They had made their choice when they chose to betray him, and Robert never gave second chances. The charitable foundation established in Harold Sinclair's name had become one of the most well-funded philanthropic organizations in Chicago. Robert had transferred over $50 million to the foundation, ensuring that his father's legacy would be one of generosity and community service rather than family destruction. Robert's phone rang, interrupting his morning reading. It was Marcus Fleming, his private investigator. "Rob, we have a situation. Tyler's been arrested." Robert set down his coffee cup. "What for?" "Assault. He got into a fight at his restaurant job, put a customer in the hospital. Apparently, the guy recognized him from the news coverage and started making comments about his family." Tyler snapped. Robert was quiet for a moment. "Is the victim seriously injured?" "Broken jaw, concussion. He'll recover, but Tyler's looking at felony assault charges. And Tyler wants me to help him. He's been asking for you since they arrested him. Keeps saying he's sorry, that he's learned his lesson." Robert considered this information dispassionately. Tyler was facing real consequences for the first time in his life, and he was handling it poorly. The boy who had once conspired to have his father committed was now begging for that same father's help. "Tell Tyler's public defender that I'll pay for the victim's medical bills," but I won't help Tyler with his legal defense. He made choices, and choices have consequences. Rob, he's still your son. No, Marcus. My son died the day he decided money was more important than family. This person sharing his name is just another criminal who needs to learn accountability. After hanging up, Robert returned to his reading, but he found it difficult to concentrate. Despite everything, hearing about Tyler's arrest had affected him more than he wanted to admit. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sinclair, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's Patricia's sister." Robert had met Karen Morgan only a few times over the years. She was Patricia's older sister, a nurse who lived a quiet life and had always seemed uncomfortable with the Sinclair family's wealth and prominence. Karen entered the office looking tired and nervous. She was dressed simply, carrying an old purse and wearing shoes that had seen better days. "Robert, thank you for seeing me." "Karen, how can I help you?" She sat down across from his desk, clearly struggling with what she wanted to say. "I've been visiting Patricia in prison." Robert said nothing, waiting for her to continue. She's not doing well. She spends most of her time in her cell, doesn't interact with the other prisoners. The guards say she barely eats." "I'm sorry to hear that." Karen leaned forward. "Robert, I know what she did was unforgivable. I know she killed your father and tried to destroy your family. But she's still my sister, and she's dying in there. Not physically, but spiritually, emotionally. What do you want from me, Karen? I want you to consider visiting her. Just once. Let her apologize to you properly, face to face." Robert's expression hardened. "Patricia lost the right to my forgiveness when she chose murder. I understand that. But Robert, you were married to her for over 20 years. Surely there's some part of you that remembers loving her." Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Karen, do you know what my father taught me about forgiveness?" "No. He taught me that forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not for the person who wronged you. It's about letting go of anger and moving forward with your life." Karen's face brightened with hope. "Then you'll consider. He also taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting consequences. Patricia murdered my father. She tried to steal everything my family built. She turned my own children against me. Those actions have consequences that no amount of remorse can erase." Robert turned back to face Karen. "I have forgiven Patricia, in the sense that I'm not consumed with anger toward her. But I will never give her the comfort of my presence or my absolution. She will live with what she's done, and she will die with it." Karen's shoulders sagged. "She talks about you constantly, about the life you had together, about the mistakes she made. Then she should have thought about that before she decided money was more important than marriage." After Karen left, Robert found himself thinking about Patricia for the first time in months. He remembered their early years together, when she had been young and beautiful and seemingly devoted to him. He remembered their honeymoon in Italy, how she had laughed at his jokes and marveled at the art in the museums they visited. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, like stories he had heard about strangers. The woman he had loved had never really existed. She had been a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to secure her place in his life and his wealth. His intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Sinclair, Ashley is here. She says it's about Tyler." Robert sighed. He had known this moment would come eventually. "Send her in." Ashley entered the office looking nothing like the privileged young woman she had once been. She was thinner, her clothes were inexpensive and worn, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of long nights and hard work. "Hello, Dad." "Ashley." She sat down without being invited, a small act of defiance that reminded Robert of her mother. "I suppose you heard about Tyler." "I did. He needs help. Real help, not just money for medical bills." Robert studied his daughter's face, looking for signs of the girl he had once loved. She was still beautiful, but there was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "What kind of help do you think he needs?" "Therapy. Counseling. Someone to help him deal with what we did to you, what we did to ourselves." Robert was surprised by her directness. "And you? Do you think you need help dealing with what you did?" Ashley met his gaze steadily. "I'm dealing with it every day. Every morning when I wake up in a crappy apartment and put on my uniform to sell clothes to people who have more money than I'll ever see again. Every time someone recognizes my name and looks at me like I'm some kind of monster." "You made choices, Ashley. Those choices had consequences." "I know that. I've learned that. But Tyler hasn't. He's angry all the time, lashing out at everyone. What happened at the restaurant isn't the first time he's lost control. Robert leaned back in his chair. What do you want from me? I want you to get him the help he needs. Not because he deserves it, but because he's still your son, and maybe because some part of him can still be saved. And what about you? Do you want to be saved? Ashley's composure cracked slightly. I want to earn the right to be in the same room as you without feeling ashamed. I want to become someone worthy of the name Sinclair again. But I know that's going to take time, and I know you might never forgive me. Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying the young woman across from him. She was different from the spoiled girl who had conspired against him. Harder, but also more honest. Ashley, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you receive as a gift, if the person you've wronged chooses to give it. Are you ever going to choose to give it? Robert's answer would determine not just Ashley's future, but his own. For 6 months, he had lived with perfect justice and perfect isolation. He had destroyed his enemies completely, but in doing so, he had also destroyed his family. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Son, revenge is justice, but justice is cold comfort when you're eating it alone. Chapter 9, The Last Signature. Robert sat alone in his office long after Ashley had left, staring at the city lights that twinkled below like fallen stars. Her visit had disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. For the first time since this nightmare began, he had seen genuine remorse, genuine change in one of his betrayers. His desk phone rang. It was Dr. Sarah Chun, the psychiatrist at Cook County Jail. Mr. Sinclair, I'm calling about your wife, your ex-wife, Patricia. I'm concerned about her mental state. Robert leaned back in his chair. In what way? She's been placed on suicide watch. She hasn't eaten in 4 days, hasn't spoken to anyone in over a week. I believe she's given up completely. I see. Mr. Sinclair, I understand the circumstances of your divorce, but Patricia keeps asking for you. She's convinced that if she could just speak to you once, apologize properly. Dr. Chun, Patricia lost the right to my time when she murdered my father. I understand your position, but from a medical standpoint, I'm worried that without some form of closure, she may succeed in harming herself. Robert was quiet for a long moment. And you think seeing me would provide that closure? I think it might give her a reason to keep living, even if that life is in prison. After hanging up, Robert walked to his father's portrait, the same painting that had hidden the safe containing evidence of the conspiracy against him. Harold Sinclair looked out from the canvas with the stern, intelligent eyes that had guided Robert through his entire life. What would you do, Dad? Robert asked the portrait. Would you show mercy to someone who showed you none? The painted eyes offered no answer, but Robert remembered something his father had said years ago. Son, the measure of a man isn't how he treats his enemies. It's how he treats his enemies when he has the power to destroy them completely. Robert had that power now. He had destroyed Vincent, Derek, Tyler, and Patricia so thoroughly that none of them would ever recover. But power without wisdom was just cruelty, and Harold Sinclair had raised his son to be better than that. The next morning, Robert drove to Cook County Jail for the first time since Patricia's arrest. The building was gray and forbidding, a monument to the consequences of bad choices and broken lives. He signed the visitor's log and was escorted through multiple security checkpoints to a small room with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. A few minutes later, a guard brought Patricia in. Robert barely recognized the woman who had once been his wife. Patricia had lost at least 30 pounds. Her auburn hair was streaked with gray, and her green eyes were hollow and lifeless. She looked decades older than her 43 years. She sat down across from him, separated by a thick glass partition, and picked up the phone with trembling hands. Robert, her voice was barely a whisper. You came. Dr. Chun was concerned about you. Patricia nodded, tears already streaming down her face. I didn't think you would ever want to see me again. I didn't. I don't. The blunt honesty of his words hit her like a physical blow, but she continued. I know what I did to you. I know what I did to your father. I know I can never make it right. Then why did you want to see me? Patricia struggled to find words. Because I needed you to know that the woman who did those things, she wasn't really me. She was someone I became, someone twisted by greed and selfishness and 20 years of living a lie. That woman was you, Patricia. She was who you chose to become. I know. I know that now. But Robert, there was a time when I loved you. Really loved you. Before the money and the status and all the rest of it corrupted me. Robert studied her face, looking for signs of deception, for the calculating intelligence that had once plotted his destruction. He found only broken honesty. When? He asked quietly. When did you love me? Because looking back, I can't tell which moments were real and which were performance. Patricia closed her eyes, remembering. Our third date. You took me to that little Italian restaurant, the one with terrible service and amazing food. You were so nervous, kept dropping your fork and apologizing. I realized that this successful, powerful man was nervous because he cared what I thought of him. Robert remembered that night. He had been terrified that Patricia would see through his confidence to the uncertainty underneath, that she would realize he had no idea how to love someone properly. You held my hand during the movie, Patricia continued. Some romantic comedy, I can't even remember. But you held my hand like it was made of glass, like you were afraid I might disappear if you held too tight. You did disappear, Robert said softly. Maybe not that night, but eventually. I lost myself, Robert. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being the woman you fell in love with and became someone I don't even recognize. Someone capable of. She couldn't finish the sentence. Someone capable of murder. Patricia flinched, but nodded. I killed a good man who never did anything but welcome me into his family. I tried to steal everything you worked for. I turned your own children against you. There's no forgiveness for that. No, Robert agreed. There isn't. They sat in silence for several minutes, looking at each other through the glass barrier that separated them. Robert could see his reflection superimposed over Patricia's face, and for a moment they looked like ghosts haunting each other. Robert, Patricia's voice was barely audible. Do you think there was ever a chance we could have been happy? Really happy? Robert considered the question seriously. I think we were happy, Patricia. For a while. Before you decided it wasn't enough. It was enough. It should have been enough. I had everything. A man who loved me, children, security, respect. But I threw it all away for something that was never real. Vincent. Not just Vincent. The fantasy of a different life, a more exciting life. I convinced myself that what we had was boring, predictable. I wanted passion and danger and... She laughed bitterly. I got it, didn't I? Robert stood up. The conversation was over, had been over before it began. Patricia was genuinely sorry, genuinely broken, but that didn't change what she had done or what she deserved. Robert, wait. Patricia pressed her hand against the glass. I know you can't forgive me. I know I'm going to die in here. But please, just tell me that some part of what we had was real. Tell me that you loved me once, even if you hate me now. Robert looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had shared his bed for 23 years, who had borne his children, who had been his partner in building the life she eventually tried to destroy. I loved you more than my own life, Patricia. I would have forgiven you anything except what you did to my father. I know that now. Robert hung up the phone and walked away without looking back. Behind him, Patricia collapsed against the glass, sobbing with the grief of someone who had finally understood the magnitude of what she had lost. Driving back to his office, Robert felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness, but a kind of peace. He had given Patricia what she needed, the knowledge that their love had been real, even if she had destroyed it. Now he had one more visit to make. Tyler sat in his jail cell, waiting for his court appearance on assault charges. He had been in custody for a week, long enough to realize that his father wasn't coming to save him. When the guard announced he had a visitor, Tyler assumed it was his public defender or maybe Ashley. The last person he expected to see was Robert. Dad. Tyler looked older, harder than when Robert had last seen him. Jail had a way of aging people quickly. Tyler. They sat across from each other in the same visiting room where Robert had met with Patricia. Tyler picked up the phone with hands that shook slightly, from withdrawal, fear, or simple emotion. I heard you were arrested. Tyler nodded. The guy kept talking about Mom, about what she did. He called her things I won't repeat, and I lost it. So you put him in the hospital. I broke his jaw. Tyler's voice was flat, defeated. My lawyer says I'm looking at 2 to 5 years. Robert studied his son's face. Tyler had always been the more volatile of his children, the one more likely to act on impulse rather than think through consequences. In that way, he was more like Patricia than Robert had ever realized. Are you sorry? Robert asked. For hitting the guy? Yeah, I guess. He didn't deserve to get hurt just for running his mouth. I meant, are you sorry for what you did to me? Tyler's composure cracked. Dad, I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for believing Mom's lies about you. I'm sorry for trying to have you committed. I'm sorry for choosing money over family. I'm sorry for being such a disappointment." Robert listened without expression. Tyler's apology sounded genuine, but Robert had heard too many lies from his family to trust words alone. "Tyler, do you know why I'm here? To tell me you're not going to help me with my legal problems? I'm here to give you a choice." Tyler leaned forward. "What kind of choice?" "You can serve your sentence for assault, and when you get out, you can continue living as Tyler Sinclair, poor, angry, and alone. Or you can plead guilty, serve your time, and when you're released, I'll give you an opportunity to earn your way back into this family." Tyler's eyes widened. "What kind of opportunity?" "You'll start at the bottom of Sinclair Holdings. Mailroom, filing, whatever needs to be done. You'll earn minimum wage, and you'll live in a company apartment. You'll attend therapy twice a week to deal with your anger issues. And most importantly, you'll prove, through your actions, not your words, that you understand what family loyalty means. And if I do all that, then maybe, in 5 or 10 years, you'll have earned the right to call yourself my son again." Tyler began to cry, but they were different tears than Robert had seen from him before. Tears of hope rather than self-pity. "Dad, I'll do anything. I'll prove to you that I can change." "Tyler, this isn't about proving anything to me. This is about you becoming someone worthy of the Sinclair name. Someone your grandfather would have been proud of." After leaving the jail, Robert drove to the small apartment where Ashley lived. It was in a rough neighborhood, the kind of place she would never have imagined living in during her privileged youth. Ashley answered the door in her work uniform, a simple dress and comfortable shoes that marked her as retail help rather than retail customer. "Dad, what are you doing here? May I come in?" Ashley's apartment was tiny but clean, furnished with pieces from thrift stores and garage sales. It was a far cry from the luxury she had once known, but Robert could see that she was trying to make it a home. "I just came from visiting your brother." Ashley sat down on her secondhand couch. "How is he?" "He's facing several years in prison, but I've offered him a chance to earn his way back into the family when he's released." Ashley's face remained carefully neutral. "And me?" Robert sat across from her in a chair that creaked under his weight. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I've been watching you for the past 6 months. You've been working, paying your own bills, living without family money for the first time in your life. The question is, are you doing it because you have to, or because you want to become someone different?" Ashley considered her answer carefully. "Both, I think. I had to learn how to live like this because you cut me off. But I want to keep living like this because I'm not the same person I was before." "How are you different?" "I understand the value of things now. I understand that money isn't just numbers in an account. It represents work, sacrifice, time that can never be recovered. When I spend $20 now, I think about how many hours I had to work to earn it." Robert nodded approvingly. "What else?" "I understand that respect has to be earned. For 20 years, people treated me well because I was Robert Sinclair's daughter and I had access to Robert Sinclair's money. Now they treat me well because I work hard and I'm honest with them." "And how does that feel?" Ashley smiled, the first genuine smile Robert had seen from her in years. "It feels better. It feels real." Robert reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. "There's a position available at the Sinclair Foundation, assistant to the director, helping coordinate charitable programs. The pay is modest, the work is demanding, and you'll be starting over from the bottom." Ashley took the card with trembling hands. "Are you offering me the job?" "I'm offering you the chance to apply for it. Whether you get it depends on whether you can convince the director that you're committed to helping people rather than helping yourself. And if I get the job, then you'll have the opportunity to prove that you've really changed, that you can use the advantages you were born with to help people who weren't as fortunate." Ashley began to cry, but like Tyler's tears, these were tears of hope. "Dad, I won't let you down." "Ashley, you're not doing this for me. You're doing this for yourself and for the memory of your grandfather." He believed that privilege came with responsibility, that those who have been given much should give much in return. Robert stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Ashley, yes. Your mother asked me to tell you that she loves you, and that she's sorry for the choices she made that hurt you and Tyler." Ashley's face crumpled. Is she going to be okay?" "No," Robert said honestly. "She's not. But she wanted you to know that none of this was your fault. You were children following your mother's lead, and she takes full responsibility for that." After leaving Ashley's apartment, Robert drove to the cemetery where his father was buried. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the headstones. He stood before Harold Sinclair's grave, looking at the simple inscription, Harold Sinclair. Devoted father, successful businessman, builder of legacies. It's done, Dad, Robert said quietly. Justice has been served. Patricia will die in prison. Vincent and Derek are paying for their betrayal. And Tyler and Ashley. Maybe they can still be saved. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment Robert could almost hear his father's voice. Son, justice without mercy is just revenge. But mercy without justice is just weakness. You've found the balance. Robert placed a single white rose on his father's grave, not for forgiveness, but for completion. The Sinclair family had been nearly destroyed by betrayal, but it would survive. It would be smaller, scarred, but ultimately stronger. As he walked back to his car, Robert's phone buzzed with a text message from Ashley. Interview scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you for the chance. I won't waste it. For the first time in over a year, Robert Sinclair smiled with genuine warmth. The last signature on his revenge had been written not in anger, but in hope. The Sinclair name would endure, carried forward by those who had learned the true cost of betrayal and the true value of redemption. In the distance, the lights of Chicago twinkled like promises of tomorrow, and Robert drove toward them, no longer alone. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.